This morning is Nick Scali, who is a serving member of the Essex and Kent Scottish, a reserve regiment with garrisons in both Chatham and Windsor. Nick enrolled in the military in September of 21, so a couple of years ago, and just finished his third phase of officer training this past summer. To be a commissioned officer in the military, you must be a university graduate, a bachelor at least, and he has that. And the training for those that are in university over the summer is quite intense. Nick would probably agree to that. When I went through it many years ago, they asked me every day if I wanted to quit, and if you didn't, they pushed you through lots of stress, physically and mentally. So whether you be regular force or reserve, officer training is difficult because the leadership of the military depends on young people like Nick. Nick is currently a platoon commander with the Essex and Kent Scottish, which is part-time. They serve most Tuesday nights and at least one weekend a month. And Nick right now is full-time because he's going to take over an administrative job because the regular force officer is leaving in December. So he'll be around for a while. Nick has a BA from the University of Windsor, and he's currently a student doing graduate studies for a Master's of History. And his subjects for his master's is the FBI and its impact on the Cold War. I'd like to see that. But the next presentation this morning.
Title screen there. Just again, a little bit of information about me. We've already talked about that. So yeah, just some visual representations here. Being an infantry platoon commander, this can consist of a few different things. Maybe a ceremonial role. So this is quite the picture here. This was us. This was the unit down at the riverfront in May. We were doing a ceremonial event presentation, new colors parade. This is me and some of the troops from the regiment. This can also include tactical exercises, which is getting a little bit cut off here on the side, but you just look here. That's the side of our job that the public often doesn't see. And unfortunately, this is not a fantastic picture. It was kind of the only one that I had, but this is me issuing a set of orders to the platoon for the first time this year at our training exercise in Custer, Fort Custer, which is in Michigan. Finally, this picture doesn't really have a ton of relevance, but I'd always put a smile on my face, so I thought it would hopefully do the same thing for you guys. This was just a gate down this past summer. That dog took quite a liking to me. Just a good memory, and yeah, again, something to good start to the presentation. So talking about Canadian operations, just going to go into a little bit of the history before we get started with talking about what's going on presently in the 21st century. So really, I thought a good place to start and a good place to kind of begin would be the Statute of Westminster, which is the beginning of when Canada had its own, or had control of its own foreign policy. So before that point, in 1931, the British are obviously, because we're still a Dominion country belonging to the Dominion of Great Britain, that we didn't have full control over our foreign policy. Pardon me, but after that we did. Obviously, the Second World War, our presence in that conflict began right at the beginning in September of 1939 with the German invasion of Poland. 1.1 Canadians served in uniform during that conflict, and about 45,000 of them gave their life. The DEP raid, well-known contribution from the Essex and Kent Scottish, which is one of the local units here in Windsor. And finally, the Korean War, unfortunately often known as, or often referred to as, kind of the forgotten war, because it, unfortunately, again, is sort of overshadowed by the Second World War, which pretty much immediately preceded it. 26,000 Canadians served in uniform, and again, over 500 lost their lives. Just something that's important to think about, again, as we rapidly approach Remembrance Day, two days out, right? So just something to consider and keep in mind. Just one more thing I want to add as well before I keep going. I will talk a little bit about, I will include points specifically about the Essex and Kent Scottish, just because it is information that I have access to, and it brings a local element to what we're talking about here, right? This isn't the full scope of local involvement in these operations, but it is a piece of that, and I thought it would be good information to bring forward. Okay, so as we move into the Cold War, starting with the Suez Canal crisis in 1956. The well-known presence of Canadians in uniform in peacekeeping operations really starts here during the Suez Canal crisis. So in 1956, the leader of Egypt, whose name was Gabdel Abdel Nasser, pardon me if I mispronounce that, he seized control of the Suez Canal from the British, nationalized it. And in response, the British tried to, they enlisted the aid of the French and the Israelis in an attempt to retake that canal. International intervention followed, not just from Canada, but also from the Americans and a few other countries. And a peacekeeping initiative was led by Lester B. Pearson, who at the time was not yet Prime Minister, obviously probably a familiar name to most of us, but was not yet Prime Minister. He was a young up-and-coming diplomat, and he put forward a motion to have a peacekeeping force go into this area and kind of prevent further conflict. So 10 countries agreed, thought it was a good idea, supplied troops, and 6,000 of them were present in Egypt for, I believe, about 7 years in order to prevent further conflict, and they were under the command of a Canadian general, E.L. Burns. And that's just a picture there of a vehicle, again, a United Nations vehicle operating in Egypt. Okay, Cyprus. So this is something that has a long scope and an expansive scope. So beginning in 1964, but going all the way until about 1993 is when sort of the Canadian presence there largely dwindles down. There's a Turkish population and a Greek population there, and they are quickly coming to, there's quite a bit of tension building, quickly building towards ethnic violence between those two groups. And the United Nations peacekeepers again come in there to try and prevent that conflict. Nicosia, the capital city, is divided by what was known as the Green Line, and just separated two groups. So there's actually still a Canadian presence there, very minor though. Largely, we were again pretty much wrapped up there in 1993. The reason I bring this up: 25,000 Canadians over the years went to Cyprus at one point or another. Some of them more than once. Actually, many of them more than once went to Cyprus more than once because it was so our presence there was so long. This is sort of the operation for a few decades, actually. During the Cold War, other than a few incidents internationally, Cyprus is sort of the major Canadian military deployment opportunity, and so everybody in the Canadian military was really pursuing deployments to Cyprus at the time. So talking about the post-Cold War period, Yugoslavia. Tito there, the leader of Yugoslavia, dies in 1980, and then communism in Europe kind of begins to crumble in 1989, 1991 during that period. And at that point, Yugoslavia kind of began to, for lack of a better phrase, unravel. The central government was no longer able to exert control over the entire country, and several independent states started to declare their independence. And we're familiar with these: Serbia, Croatia. A lot of us are familiar with this history. The kind of most prominent incident that Canadians were involved with during this conflict was at the Medak Pocket, when Canadian forces were sent in to ensure that the Croatian soldiers actually left because there were concerns that there would be violence against civilians in that area. And they did actually get into an engagement with Croatian forces there in September 1983. Haiti, I'm not going to get into too much detail on this, but Canadian forces have been in and out of Haiti several times. I think mid-1970s, mid-1990s. Again, kind of providing support and providing humanitarian aid in Haiti over the years. Somalia, again, the public inquiry into the death of a Somalian adolescent there has had long-standing implications, both for the CAF and for its role as a peacekeeper. I think there's an argument to be made that this event was at least in part responsible for the conclusion of that peacekeeping role that Canada had internationally. And then Rwanda in 1994 to 96. The peacekeeping force there was led by a Canadian, Major General Dallaire, who's pictured to the top right there. Were, for lack of a better phrase, were prevented from taking further action and preventing the genocide that occurred there. But there was a significant Canadian presence in that contingent. Okay, talking about Afghanistan. So obviously this all goes back to 9/11. That's really where it gets started. And the first Canadian troops arrived in December to January period of 2002. And as the conflict sort of dwindles down, the Taliban are largely taken out of power. This transfers into more like stability operations. Canadian Armed Forces predominantly are operating out of Kandahar during that time. And we spent several years there trying to provide the support to the Afghani government that they needed to create stability and peace in Afghanistan. It's a very dangerous period, a lot of lives lost. Medusa is a well-known operation that occurred within Afghanistan. 1,000 members of the CAF took part in that. That was our largest sort of combat operation since Korea. So pretty significant scale there. 40,000 Canadians between 2001 and 2014 served in Afghanistan, and 158 lives lost. Our combat role largely ended in 2011. Those last few years were largely, I believe, an advisory and support role to the Afghan government. Again, just some numbers here. So from the E&K, 25 personnel from the unit on Op Archer, 14 personnel on Op Athena during those years, and then that's Op Attention there. Again, it's being cut off, but 6 personnel from the E&K on that operation. So a significant local presence. Again, that's just the E&K. That's not even including the other reserve units in Windsor. It's not including individuals from Windsor who might be part of the Red Force that went over there, of which there are many. Okay, so domestic operations. This is really the raison d'etre of the reserves. Like this is pretty much the function that the reserves provides to the Canadian taxpayer and to the Canadian government. Domestic operations are key, and if you'll ever see things like Observance, the wildfire, anything that you hear in the news, oh, we've got wildfires or floods, and the army's going in there. Very, very likely it's going to be reserve troops from the local area as well. If something were to happen here in Windsor, it would probably be Windsor reserves that come in to assist. So just again, some examples of that. Op Laser. This is our immediate response to the COVID pandemic, and this just as a kind of a blanket idea, we're just supporting public health measures in any way. A lot of presence in retirement homes, that sort of thing. And then when the vaccine came out, Op Vector, this is how we supported the distribution of the COVID vaccine, whether that be logistically, planning, anything like that. And finally, Op Lentis. So this is really kind of what I'm trying to get at here with when it comes to domestic operations. Op Lentis is something that is an operation that doesn't really have a solid date attached to it because it's just kind of ongoing. And again, anytime wildfires, hurricanes, floods, anything like that, reserve personnel are going to be deployed, and they're just going to provide basically a source of labor to make sure that we get done what we need to get done to help out the Canadian taxpayer, evacuate people, mitigate damage to their property, anything like that. Okay, so talking about Op Unifier, this is the capacity building mission in support of the armed forces of Ukraine. That's a lot of jargon for training and providing military aid to the Ukrainians. So if we see these two pictures here, this is just no need to be alarmed. This is just a scenario. These are just actors. A few combat medics here who are demonstrating to Ukrainian soldiers in the background looking on about how to provide combat first aid. And those are Canadians there, as well as in the bottom right, you've got a Canadian soldier just kind of directing directing a young Ukrainian there. Again, providing equipment in the forms of things like tanks, artillery, anti-tank systems, missile systems, all those sorts of things. About 300 Canadians are taking part in that operation at the moment. Okay, so op impact. So its initial purpose. Its purpose now is to set the conditions for stability in these countries here, Iraq, Jordan, and Lebanon. Its initial purpose was Canada's response to the Islamic State and the violence that ensued there in the Middle East. But we have transitioned into more, again, it's stability oriented now. Again, so activities, training, advising, assisting. We've got a few photos here. Top left, we've got some Canadian troops showing Lebanese soldiers how to, by the looks of it, how to use some snowshoes, which is, I know it's not really what you think about, but it is interesting as well that those snowshoes that they're training the Lebanese on are look to be far superior and than the ones we often use. Those are for some pretty fancy snowshoes, but yeah, that's what we're doing, and that's some of what we're doing. Again, bottom left, just teaching, training, that sort of thing. Again, about 300 personnel involved in this at the moment, and equipment involved. The CF-18s, I only. Whoa. Okay, well, skip that. I'm not really sure how to fix it, but CF-18s were involved in that at the outset of that mission, again, in order to combat the Islamic State. From my understanding, those CF-18s are kind of, the jets there are largely, aren't really part of the operation anymore, just because they're no longer needed, but that's the beginning of op impact. They had a significant role. Okay, op reassurance, which is based out of Latvia. This is the big one. This is the largest overseas operation that Canada has at the moment, and its purpose is to reinforce our commitment to NATO and to help deter aggression. This is being done through a series of training exercises. Now, I should say that these aren't your run-of-the-mill training exercises. These are very large, very sophisticated. They're integrating Canadians, Americans, Polish, Latvians, like just all sorts of different NATO countries coming together, training together in the way that we would go about it if we ever had to actually work as an alliance. So right now, Canadian personnel in Latvia, about 1,000, but this is going up to 2,200 by 2026. So we're more than doubling our commitment to Eastern Europe. And our equipment, in a similar vein, we've quite a bit of equipment is being delegated to this task. So some ships, the HMCS Summerside is visible in the bottom right here, or maybe not visible in the bottom right, but it's a big ship. Howitzers, artillery, right? You can see in the middle. LAV-6s, which are armored personnel carriers, in the bottom left. Things like drones, right, in the top middle. And finally, Canada is also sending Leopard 2 tanks to Latvia as well. So, point being, we're throwing a lot of money at this. We're throwing a lot of equipment, time, and everything at the moment, and we will continue to do that. Did I have a question?
That's been there for years and years and years and years, right?
Yeah. So Canadian, like we've had Canadian personnel in Europe, of course, for years.
Latvia has that base has been there for like a long time.
Yes, absolutely, and it's the presence really.
But it's bigger now, right?
It was only because of the invasion of Crimea.
Right.
That's when it started.
Okay.
So yeah, Canadian forces present in Europe for a while, but in Latvia specifically, 2014 is when we really start to get in there. So. Okay, so these are just a few numbers. I'll just leave these up for a second.
There's your numbers.
This is just some figures from, again, just from the Essex and Kent Scottish in terms of those three big operations. So Latvia, or Op Reassurance on the left, impacts the Middle East is visible in the middle, and finally Unifier, which is again based out of the United Kingdom, now on the right there. There we go. Okay, so I just included this photo because I found it online and I liked it quite a bit. Sir, you might recognize the figure with the ambassador here. I blacked out his name because I'm not really sure what the rules are on like operational security. But so this individual here is a member of the unit and is a person that I know closely. And again, this is just sort of a representation of what's going on overseas, the local contribution to that. Here it is in a visual representation. It's going on. This is again a member of the E&K accompanying the ambassador to Canada's ambassador to Kuwait, just doing an inspection here with the troops in Kuwait as well. Okay, so looking ahead, again, we've got the situation in Eastern Europe, which doesn't appear to be changing anytime soon. Canadian troops are probably going to be present there until the need for deterrence is no longer needed. And again, that situation doesn't look to be changing anytime soon. In fact, as we spoke about, Canadian commitments there will probably increase in the near future. The Middle East, obviously, op impact still going on, but with everything that's happening, unfortunately, that operation may also shift and may also grow rather than shrink. And again, throughout the world, we've got an increasingly unstable world, unfortunately, and sort of a rising trend of authoritarianism. And I'm not going to touch too much on this, but if there's one thing that I think that the Canadian forces are doing and internationally, it's providing support to democracy abroad, to internationally, and kind of trying to stem the tide of that authoritarianism and that trend internationally. Okay, does anybody have any questions? Yes.
I've got one when you brought up the idea of working with other countries like Latvia and Poland and that, and training together and things. Is there a worry about espionage with all that potential looseness of different countries that someone might, say, okay, they're training in this way and that way, and
Again, I'm not the subject matter expert on this. My thought is, again, to put it bluntly, like, do the Russians have spies in Eastern Europe? Like,
right,
it's fairly well known in terms of what they know about us and how we conduct our operations. At some level, there probably is a concern there, but it's almost intentionally trying to show them what we can do as a show of strength. Is probably would be my understanding of that. So we want everyone to understand that we are capable of fending off aggression. So if in terms of what we give away, that's probably less important than making that point that we can and will defend if we have to.
yeah, that sounds good.
Yes.
Yeah, if there's any other questions, you can talk to him afterwards, because we have to be out of here. I think on behalf of the membership here, I wanted to thank you for coming out today. It's always interesting to hear the stories that events tell us when they come here to talk to us. It was very interesting today, so I want to thank you for that. And on behalf of us, we have a little jar of honey for you.
Thank you so much, Terry. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care. Appreciate that.
You get a picture?